Get on.
All right, well, good evening, everyone. I'm State Senator Rob Sampson, joined by my amazing colleague, my favorite co-legislator, Representative Gale Mastrofrancesco, and we're delighted to join you guys tonight. The first town hall meeting we're going to hold in a series of town hall meetings. We'll do another one in Southington next Monday, and I'll be doing them throughout the rest of the Senate District, which is going to include Prospect and Cheshire and Waterbury as well. We haven't set times or dates for those, but they'll be coming up soon. And there's a lot to report about what happened in the legislative session, and there's news even from today, which I'm sure we will get into a little bit. But mostly we're here to answer your questions and talk about concerns about what's going on in the state. There are any issues that we should start with, Gale, do you think of? Should we talk about the budget or?
I mean, we could talk about the news today if you want to start with that, or the budget, whatever. There's a lot that went on this year. It was a long session. We started in January and we ended in on June 4th. Next year will be a short session. So there was a lot of bills put forward by the legislature, by the representatives, probably about 4,000, I think it was almost 4,000 pieces of legislation, and we probably voted on about 400 or so that we actually came to us that we actually voted on. So it was really a busy session. So a lot was going on. The budget we did.
The total number of bills we did was lower than it traditionally is, and I think that's a good thing. When you don't agree with the majority and you're trying to stop what they're attempting to accomplish, the fewer number of bills is generally a good thing. And I think we've changed a lot about the way the minority party is operating. The Senate Republicans, for sure, we have certainly developed much more of a backbone in the last couple of sessions and have decided to push back a lot harder on the Democrats in the majority. And of course, they're squealing about it. We can talk about that too. I had the Speaker of the House complaining about me extolling the virtues of stopping bad bills in the last couple of days. He was very angry about that. And of course, and the governors also mentioned that too, and they're vowing that we're going to go back in for a special session. And the news from today kind of makes that very clear that they want to bring us in. So the news from today is that the governor vetoed two bills. One of them was the striking workers bill, which basically is a bill that says that anyone in a labor dispute has the ability to go collect unemployment effectively. That applies to certainly union labor. It also applies to single individuals who simply are having an issue with their job. And effectively what it means also is that there's going to be no more cases at the Department of Labor to determine whether someone's eligible for unemployment, because automatically with that legislation you would have been. And that was a bridge too far for the governor, thank heavens. I think he realized that that is a preposterous piece of legislation. That you're asking not only the company that is employing the person to pay additional premium in their unemployment compensation insurance as a result of having people paid for going out on unemployment when there's a labor dispute or a strike. You're also asking that those costs get passed on to consumers. So effectively, we'd all be paying more as a result of such a policy. And this is something that's been bouncing around for the last several years. At the end of the previous legislative session, they actually did not move the bill itself. They had the same striking workers bill that they passed this year, but they didn't move it. We debated it in the Senate, never was brought up in the House, but on the final night of the legislative session, the Democrats tried to bring up a parallel piece of legislation that they were referring to as the striking workers bill. But really, that was just an even crazier thing, which would have been to give several $1 million to the comptroller to do as he pleases. To give it to unemployed people or people on strike or whatever, with absolutely no oversight whatsoever. Crazy, crazy stuff. Ultimately, the governor vetoed that, which was good. And he vowed to veto an actual striking workers bill too, which I'm very pleased that he, kept his promise to do so. It seems kind of crazy that we went through this very lengthy and repeated debates, both in the committee, the House, the Senate, to go through this bill, many, many, many hours of debate. And a lot of that I took part in personally, and ultimately for nothing, so that it would be vetoed in the end, just like the governor always said he would.
Right, and last year's bill was obviously, like I said, the striking workers bill, but it just kind of gave it a different name and different wording on it, but it actually was basically the striking worker bills. And just speaking of bills, before you get into the housing bill they vetoed, just so you know, we mentioned how many bills are put forward every year. So we're in the minority, right? We're Republicans. So we put a lot of pieces of bills, legislation together that we propose. Not a lot of those bills actually get put forward or get to a public hearing. Some of them do. You have to push really hard, but you probably put in a couple hundred bills. I'm thinking I put in probably 100. And the chances of us getting even a percentage of those to even get to a public hearing are pretty rare, because we are in the minority, they're in the majority, and they really can pass anything that they want to pass. So it's not like we're not trying.
I don't know if they can pass anything they want to pass. Look,
they-
they have to prioritize.
Right.
This is the bottom line. The Democrats, because of their majorities in both chambers and their veto-proof majorities in both chambers, which is a concern, because we're certainly going to talk about the governor's race at some point tonight. But they have the power and the votes for anything.
Right.
But that also means that they have to prioritize, because their own members are putting forth hundreds, thousands of bills. The minority members are also putting hundreds, thousands of bills. They get to decide which bills have a hearing, which bills have a vote at the committee level. They decide which bills actually have a vote in the House or Senate. So they're controlling all of that. But we are also in control of the time that it takes to debate any of these bills, the amendments that we're going to put on, and just how much aggravation that they're going to have to go through if they want any particular piece of legislation. So they are forced to prioritize. And when it gets close to the end of session, we have a lot more influence, because at any point in the last few days, any Republican lawmaker can probably get up and say, I'm going to stop this place, nothing's going to happen, unless it happens our way. And particularly people that have the ability to talk or offer amendments, they have even more influence. So we have a lot of control in the last few days. It's this battle of, well, the Democrats want to use people like me and Gale as a foil to say, well, these bills didn't pass because of that. It's like, no, those bills didn't pass because you didn't prioritize them early enough in the session. And frankly, I think it's because they don't want to pass some of their own members' bills.
Right.
And just one other thing I want to say about that is that, we put in a lot of individual pieces of legislation and bill proposals that we know are never going to go anywhere. But we're doing that because we're trying to send a signal to our constituents. These are the things we want to do. If we were in power, these are the things we would do.
Absolutely.
These are the things that the majority is neglecting to do that you might agree with us should be done. So that's the reason why we're doing it. And also, from my perspective, I'm very concerned about the day that Republicans are in a majority. I want to make sure that when that happens, and it will happen someday, that we are ready, that we hit the ground running, that we have a plan, a blueprint. So the bills that I propose I'm doing that as a blueprint for the Republicans when we're in
We would love
majority.
our bills to pass. Even get a public hearing would be nice, but.
Yeah, and these are bills that shrink government.
Yes.
If people hear bills, oh, you're passing more bills. No, we're passing bills that restructure, shrink government, make it more responsible to the people.
Let's control back to the power of the people.
Yep, amen.
Which is what we're supposed to do.
Housing bill you were going to talk about.
Housing bill, so yes, so aside from the striking workers bill today, there has been a lot of pressure put on the governor to veto the housing bills. Everybody here is kind of familiar with the housing bill, the zoning. Well, Rob is fortunate, he's the ranking member on the housing committee, right? So
Yes, I am.
he has done a lot of work on that bill to try to stop it. And there's been a lot of pressure, a lot of small groups within the state of Connecticut, like CT 169 Strong, and all these smaller groups within Connecticut really putting the pressure on the governor to veto it. And it actually worked. And that bill really would have taken a lot of control away from local towns when it came to their zoning laws. And I'll have Rob really kind of explain more, but since he is the ranking member of the housing committee, I'll send it over to you to go ahead.
Thanks for all the accolades.
Well, you are the ranking member,
yes.
It's only fair, you wanna talk about election stuff, I can
Yes,
take
oh yeah,
that.
exactly. Yeah, so I mean, that's if you guys don't know already, when you serve in the legislature, you are appointed to various different committees. I serve on 4 committees now. I had 5 at the start of the session, but we moved some things around. And you have 4 committees too. So you can be a regular rank and file member, or you can be something called a ranking member, or you could be a chairman. And chairman is something that the majorities appoints. They could elect a minority member to be chairman, but that would be unusual. So they elect themselves a chairman, but the minority party also gets to create a chairman also, except that chairman's called a ranking member. And so I serve as a ranking member on the labor committee. That's why I'm very familiar with the striking workers bill. the Housing Committee, Government Administration Elections, and Government Oversight. So I'm ranking member on all 4 committees that I serve on. That is partly because there's only 11 Republican senators. And there's just not enough of us to go around. There's a lot of committees.
Right.
And it just so happens that on all 4 of those committees, I'm the only Republican senator. So I'm really and all of the committees are bicameral committees. They're, they're joint committees. They have both representatives and senators on them. So sometimes the committees will have 25 members or so, and they'll say be 3 or 4 Democratic senators, 1 Republican senator, and then there's 15 Democratic reps and 6 Republican reps.
Right.
Gale, you're ranking on.
I am the ranking member on Government Administration's Elections Committee, along with
We're
Senator
co-ranking
Sampson.
members on that
Co-ranking
committee.
members, and we deal with a lot of election stuff, which I'm sure we'll get into at some point today.
Yeah, sure.
So the housing.
Oh, I think you were going to list your other committees.
Oh, sorry. Children's Committee, I'm on Human Services Committee, GAE, and
You forgot your committees.
there's one other one. Oh my God, I just it's been a long.
We like to block things out when you leave that place. You want to leave it in the rearview mirror.
So I serve on 4. Rob serves on 4, and
Yeah, at the start of the year, I was on the Judiciary Committee too.
right, that's right.
But I also have a lot of responsibilities within the Senate Republican Caucus. I'm what's called the screening chairman, which is kind of the guy who is responsible for knowing all the bills and being responsible for making the decision about where we stand as a caucus on the bills, obviously with the input of the other Republican senators. But my job is to know the bills, be prepared for all the bills, come up with good amendments, and kind of either bless things that are okay or make sure we mark the things that are really bad that we have to stand up against. The housing bill. The housing bill is not even a housing bill. So that's the first thing you should know is it's a planning and zoning bill really more than anything. This bill came to the Housing Committee early on. It was 1 paragraph. I think it was 10 lines long. And basically it was a study about homelessness. That's really what it was. House Bill 5002. And much like they always do at the very end of the session, they bring the bill out onto the floor of the House and they gut what was in there via what's called a strike all amendment. Somebody will stand up on the majority side and say, Mr. Speaker, I have a strike all amendment, which means they're going to strike everything that's in the bill and replace it with something else.
Which was pretty much every bill this year.
Yes, and they do a strike all on almost every bill.
Every bill.
And it's so funny because we will offer amendments and they will be like, well, Senator, your amendment sounds very good and very interesting, except, did this have a hearing? And it's like, nothing you do had a hearing. Nothing. You guys, every bill that you do, you are putting new language in that never had a hearing. It's a hypocrisy will drive you just absolutely insane. So the bill really is now, it was 92 pages, I think, at the end of the day. So it expanded from 10 lines, less than 1 page, to 92 pages. A good sized bill, not the biggest bills that we see, but definitely a good sized bill. And really what it is it's a complete and utter takeover of local planning and zoning control. And the idea really is a few things. One, it is to replace local planning and zoning officials in towns, particularly well-run small towns like Wolcott, and force them to live by what the state level Democrats think is the way our town should be run. Which means they think that you should be able to put a 50-unit apartment building on a cul-de-sac next to some single-family homes. They think that that's perfectly fine and that's what we should do. Part of it is it's being driven by these folks in this organization called Desegregate Connecticut. And they have this opinion that we live in a racist country and that we live in a racist state and that planning and zoning is racist. And the way to overcome that is to allow inner city type buildings to appear in rural neighborhoods. That's really what the thing is all about. They also take away any authority of local governments to make requirements about how many parking spaces there should be for a certain building. You would say you're putting in a 25-unit building, you should have enough parking for 50 people, say. No, not required anymore. 3 parking spaces, good enough. Things like that. Really, really crazy, crazy ideas. We could go through the laundry list of them, but really, if you start to go through the thing, you just realize what they're doing is they're trying to take the wealth and success of small, well-run communities across our state. We have 169 towns. Most of them are fairly well-run, responsible communities, trying to take what they have and suck the wealth right out of it to prop up the big cities. And they also want to, in any way they can, start to insert a minority population, for lack of a better term. They really want more Democrats in Wolcott, and this is the way they're gonna do it. They're gonna put apartment buildings in our town.
So for example, Rite Aid down here on the street, they make clothes, I hear they're closing.
Yeah.
That bill basically said that somebody could come in and put apartments in there. Right there. That's just an example, with no minimum parking.
As of right conversion
Right.
from commercial into residential. So a gas station, a dry cleaner, something that needs some sort of remediation, brownfields for crying out loud, all that stuff. I mean, they just, willing to override local zoning. Now, of course, this is not an issue of race or anything for Republicans. It's an issue of local control. It's an issue of home rule for us. We believe, as Republicans, on every issue, that individuals have the maximum amount of freedom and therefore the maximum right to choose their destiny, their life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness, right? That's what our country is founded on. And we believe that because we empower individuals to make their own decisions, we should also empower them to make their own zoning decisions when they can. And also, government is best which is closest to the individual. So when you have government making decisions about the way the town of Wolcott works and operates, it should be made by people from the community that were elected by members of the community who make those decisions. And they're trying to replace all that with what the Democrats, frankly, their view of government is that they want centralized power, is what they want. They want some top authoritarian overseer dictating to everyone how we should all live. And that's what they want to do. They want to take away local control and home rule and replace it with big government.
Right? One size
Big
fits all.
government, yep.
People move to certain towns for a certain reason, whether it's for their school system, maybe like in Litchfield, you have to have at least an acre of land to own a house. They like that country view. There's reasons why people move to where they move to. And that doesn't sit well with them up in Hartford because they want it to be more congested, more of like a bus line. They want obviously buses to come through the towns. That bill was really, really bad. It was bad. There was one piece of legislation in there that hostile architecture, is that what they called it?
Yes.
Where, let's just say you had a bench, the bench out there, it can't have anything sharp, it can't be designed anything hostile. Sharp, because if someone who does not have a home and they want to sleep on the bench, we have to make sure that they are protected and they don't get hurt. So there were things, that was bad.
Oh, of course, that was the only thing left in the bill about homelessness. Remember, the bill was originally about homelessness. In fact, the bill, when it was passed on the floor of the Senate, I'm reading up there, it says an act concerning homelessness. So I'm asking the chairman who's bringing out the bill, I'm like, well, tell me what this does about homelessness. It's like, nothing. That was the only thing that was left, was the hostile architecture.
Wasn't there a piece in there originally that allowed tents?
Oh, yes. Frankly, there were a lot of other,
bad.
we have so many things we want to tell you guys, but we just don't have enough time.
Is that gonna come up in a special session?
So,
Is that what you're talking about?
the bottom line about this conversation, really, before we get too ahead of ourselves and off on too many tangents, is that the governor vetoed the striking workers bill and he vetoed 5002, which is this terrible planning and zoning bill. The thing is that now they're talking about bringing us back in for a special session. They're gonna fix that bill. Oh, Lord. I mean, I almost feel like they're gonna make it worse.
Yes.
That's my major concern about the thing, is that, they're gonna start digging around in it again, and the advantages that we have in the minority go away in a special session, because there's no time limit. During the regular session, it ends at a certain time certain. And everything they've got to accomplish, they have to squeeze into that ever-shrinking envelope. Special session, they could start it tomorrow and it doesn't have to end. It could go on 6 months. So we don't have the ability to use our...
Who makes that decision?
Just the speaker and
The Speaker of the House?
and the Senate.
The governor can
Senate.
call us in by himself, and I think the two House and Senate leaders can call us in.
Okay.
So the Democrats basically will be able to decide.
What they are so very good at, the majority party, is that creating a crisis and then trying to come to the rescue. It's no different here than it is in Washington, right? So Connecticut is a sanctuary state for so many things. And there's so many people moving into here because you get everything free, right? They put everybody on some sort of state assistance. They make it very difficult for landlords. They make it very difficult for contractors to want to build more housing in here. So they created their own problem and they want to try to fix it with this piece of legislation. It's really terrible.
They're not really trying to fix anything. They're all about control, power and control, and shaping society in the image that they want. And effectively what they're trying to do is create dependency. Almost every program that they pass, every law is all designed to create dependency on government. You know, if you're a nonprofit and you rely on funding from the state, the Democrats are going to pull those purse strings constantly. So you got to support us, and if you're not supporting us, you're not getting this money. And at some point in our conversation, in fact, we do want to tell you about the state budget because there's a lot of crazy things in that document, including page after page of non-government organizations, NGOs, receiving mountains of money. You know, some of them small chunks, $4,000 or $5,000, others hundreds of thousands, even millions of dollars, for these, frankly, I would say illegitimate organizations.
Yeah.
Because you start to look these up, I'm going one by one down the page of all these different organizations, of which I brought the printout, and you can't find them. You search them, these people are getting hundreds of thousands of dollars from the state. They don't have a Facebook page, they don't have a website, they don't have a phone number, you can't even track them down.
Right.
And then you start to dig deeper, then you realize, oh, there's members of the minority party that are on the board of directors of these organizations. I'm like, how is that ethical? You know, that we're just handing out money to friends of the majority. Crazy stuff.
And a little statistic for you is, you know, years ago, we didn't have a lot of people on state assistance. We had obviously a good number, but, you know, the population was 3.5 million people. About a third of our residents are on some sort of state assistance. A third. So when you talk about dependency, it goes to his point about they want you dependent on the government. A third, that is a lot of people. We're back in it with
Can you
probably a
love a
couple.
list of those NGOs, please?
Yeah, oh yeah, certainly.
Yeah, they're in the.
Yeah, if you want to do the research, oh my God.
We have a team already.
Yeah,
that has been actively,
The Medicaid alone, when I was first elected in 2011, I remember that there were around 150,000 people on Medicaid in the state of Connecticut. 150,000. After Obamacare, which, forget whatever anybody told you, the goal behind Obamacare, at least in the state of Connecticut, was not for people to have alternative path to get some sort of health insurance. It was to go on state benefits. That when you call the Connecticut Insurance Exchange, the first thing they do is try and get you on Medicaid. That's like step one.
Yep.
Only after they can't get you on Medicaid because, you know, you're too qualified or whatever, then they start talking about some insurance product. But since the creation of the Health Insurance Exchange and Obamacare in Connecticut, now there's over 1 million people in Connecticut on Medicaid as a result. We went from 150,000 to over 1 million.
So
Can you
our
imagine? It's just incredible.
philosophy is really for people to be independent of themselves, right? Create jobs, create opportunity for people so they do not depend on the taxpayers, I don't say the state, but taxpayers, to foot their bills all the time.
We believe that people can succeed on their own, that they don't need the government to take care of them from cradle to grave. And, you know, that's the basic real differences between what we're fighting up in Hartford, is the expansion of government, the expansion of dependency, that attitude that government is the solution to all problems, and us who believe that government has a role to play, but it should be a limited role. And its main job is to protect the rights of individuals and to create fairness in the opportunity zone so that people can achieve things on their own and succeed. They believe in fairness in results, which means no matter how much effort somebody puts in, they still get to achieve the same benefit. And we don't believe that. We believe that if you work hard, you should get more.
Right.
Did the governor give a reason why he vetoed both those bills?
Yes. What's so remarkable about the planning and zoning bill that he vetoed is that he immediately turned around and attacked the people that were pushing so hard for him to veto, which is this organization called CT 169 Strong, 169 being the number of towns. And this organization is made up of a lot of individual advocates, but also a lot of town officials, mayors, first selectmen from all across the state, and in both parties. And they were pushing back in a big way. They're like, you're taking away our entire reason for existence as town governments. And so the governor, in his veto message today, he said, I'm vetoing this bill. And the people that were really pushing for this veto, they can't get along with anybody. They're, you know, I forget his exact quotes. But I'm like, what a dumb political thing to say. You just angered all the people that wanted the bill and the people that you agreed with to veto it, you just said something nasty about them. who's advising him? I mean,
Yeah, and he was getting.
it's embarrassing we can't beat this guy for governor, frankly. I mean, it's just really, that's how I feel about it.
He was getting pressure from the mayors from the municipalities, like Connecticut Conference of Municipalities, getting pressure from them. So at some point, I have to be honest with you, I was a little leery. I didn't think he was going to veto it. He was kind of on the fence. But in the end,
He waited a long time.
he really did. He could have done that right in the beginning. The striking workers bill, I will say that I think he has always been against that, as from what I've seen. He's come out right away in the beginning saying that he was not in favor.
I think he was
of that.
wavering on that too, otherwise he wouldn't have waited.
Yeah,
There were demonstrations at the governor's mansion,
Yeah.
and it's an election year. Obviously, every year's an election year, and the union's definitely pushing him to sign that legislation. But he did say many, many times he was going to veto striking workers.
Yeah.
I think that the veto of the planning and zoning bill is a strong indication that the governor is running for re-election. I really do believe that, because it's a very smart political move, even though it's going to cause him some strife within the Democratic Party, and certainly with the leaders of the House and Senate Democrats who are angry about it.
because that was their bill.
Yeah, it was their bill was one of their most important
Priorities.
things that they did.
One of the priorities.
Yeah, if you could just tell them, stick with me, next year I'll get this for you. You
Right.
get me back in, I'll get you the bill next year.
Right, and who knows what the special session will bring. The bill could come out worse. I mean, it really could. Would not surprise me at all.
Well, it's interesting, I read an article in there that the speaker, they have indicated that they wanted to change it, but they weren't talking about changing it to the better. They were actually talking about strengthening it. So,
Yeah, because the
that's
bill
scary,
was
but-
watered down over and over and over again.
so, yeah, so
But just
that's
as
scary.
Gale mentioned about the homeless stuff, some of the homeless stuff that was in there was just really crazy. I mean, look, I like to help people as much as possible and everything else. But they had provisions in another homeless bill that could have, ended up in this thing, which basically would have said that homeless people basically have as of right on any public property. That means they can set up camp on the town green.
Tents and porta potties.
Yeah, tents, yeah, oh yeah, anywhere.
I thought that passed in another bill,
No, it
didn't they?
didn't. No, it didn't. I asked during the committee debate, I'm like, what about the state capitol? That's public property. Somebody could camp out right in the state capitol? Oh, yeah.
Yeah, right here, put your tents.
And basically what it would allow is them to do any activities of daily living,
Yes,
ADL.
shower, everything,
Yeah, cooking.
cooking.
I'm like, so somebody could be homeless and set up camp down by the Nathan Hale statue in the state capitol and be flipping burgers down there. Sure enough. Craziness. But I mean, think about the idea of someone being able to sleep in their car on any cul-de-sac, in town. I mean, people are gonna be nervous about that kind of situation.
I have a question. So if a majority party bring you back to the special session, and it's very possible it's gonna pass, right, the bill, and can the governor veto the bill again?
Yes,
Okay,
no doubt about
and he would continue to veto.
it. I have a feeling that if they actually do bring us in for a special session, there will be a negotiation between the governor and the House and Senate Democrat leadership. So they will know and agree on what the bill says first.
And once we go into session, it's pretty evident that it will pass.
Yeah, they don't bring up bills unless they're gonna pass. I mean, they have their own members. It's not like they wonder.
Right.
They're like, you guys voting for this? Okay, good.
And in a special session, time is not on our side because we can't talk from now until next February.
And
We can try.
We could try, but
I
time
have
is.
a couple of questions about some specific legislation
Sure.
that passed. One was something that went through the GAE, about right of succession. If the governor
Yes, yeah.
or none of his people could step up into the governorship, that the Speaker of the House would automatically get voted in as governor. So my question relates to the Connecticut Constitution, because that legislation actually violates the Connecticut Constitution. The Connecticut Constitution basically says that if the governor cannot serve, that the House of Representatives goes into session and picks who would succeed. So again, and it could be anybody, it could be you, it could be you.
I think it's just for temporary though.
Yeah, I
until-
mean, the bill does not make a new replacement governor. All it does is says is who's in charge if the governor is not available.
Right,
And I think that's the distinction.
that's it.
Because we brought that up during the committee,
Yeah.
that the Constitution is very specific on this issue and that you'd have to do a constitutional amendment.
Right.
So I think they phrased the bill in a way, and again, it's a legitimate thing. We've had this situation before where all of the constitutional officers are gone. There's nobody in the state.
And
It's like,
something
well,
happens.
so what if something happens? We need to
Well,
have someone.
You know, my question would be is what happens if everybody is arrested, okay? And what happens then? Then the Speaker of the House automatically goes into the governor's spot. But my question is, again, in the Constitution, it basically says that the House of Representatives would need to elect a temporary governor.
That would be more for permanent. Is that what you're saying?
No, it would be a temporary governor until an election could be held. That's my question. Okay, my second question, okay, is the Children's Committee and all of the inappropriate literature that we are seeing in libraries and schools. What happened with that bill?
That bill actually was inserted into the budget, implemented, and it passed.
So they are going to move forward with what they are doing because there's going to be lawsuits. Okay, there's definitely going to be
I hope
lawsuits
so.
by yeah.
And is everybody here familiar with that bill? So I'll just kind of give you a high level without getting into too much detail on it. But there have been schools within Connecticut that have books in the school library. I'm not talking about the public library. My focus is more on the school library for these young children that are very inappropriate. And there have been, you can go online and you can see samples of the books, and there is a big push to make sure parents, one, know what their children are reading in the schools, and that they're inappropriate for a young child. You have 6, 7, 8-year-olds reading, seeing graphic sexual pictures in a book, and the language of the books is really inappropriate and very offensive. So there was a bill put in to try to, the Democrats put a bill in to stop the towns or basically the Board of Education's from not allowing those books in the schools. So right now, if you want to challenge a book that's in the school, you're not banning it, but you're challenging it. Look, this is inappropriate. There's a process that you go through. You go through your Board of Ed, they talk to the library, there's a whole process that you go through. What they are doing is really cutting off that process and letting the librarians make those decisions and taking the control away from the parents to even challenge, to make any of those challenges that these books may not be appropriate for their kids in school.
The Democrats are very, very clever at the way they have manipulated this issue. They have characterized anyone who is concerned about this as a book banner.
Right.
We're book banners. And really it has nothing, no one wants to ban anything. Banning means you're gonna stop the production, sale, availability of things. And that's not the case at all. It's about what is age appropriate in a school setting.
School.
You know, and these books, I mean, if we brought these books, they're worse than pornography.
Yeah.
I'm telling you the stuff that is
I
in these
think
books.
they violate 2 criminal statutes.
Yeah.
So corruption of minors, okay?
Yeah.
And there's another statute that they basically violate. You just have to get it in front of a judge with an injunction.
Unbelievably vulgar material.
Very vulgar.
Very, very bad.
And again, I just want to finish my thought, which is that our goal is not to get rid of these books. Our goal is to leave this current process in place where members of the community can come speak to their elected officials and say, we don't believe that this book is age appropriate for 6th graders, for example, and we want you to keep that, on the high shelf, for some other, age appropriate material, that's all.
Is this just school libraries or this public libraries as well?
Libraries.
Okay, so the public libraries are off the map.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, thank you.
Yeah, they can do whatever they want.
Our complaint really is with the school. Me personally, I don't think any of them should be in the school. Those are something for the parents to decide. They can go to the public libraries to find them, and the schools should get back to the basics of teaching.
I don't want to beat
But
this.
that's just me.
The
But
succession bill, but I just want to finish our conversation, which is the Constitution of the state of Connecticut was not changed. So the Constitution is still in effect.
Right.
So that nothing that was passed in the legislature can overwrite. And it won't,
Right.
because if they ever try that, someone's going to challenge it, it's going to be found unconstitutional. But I don't believe that the bill that was passed had any intent of changing the order of succession. It doesn't change that. The order of succession is determined by the Constitution. They didn't have the votes or the will to do a constitutional amendment. What it does is it says who's in charge when somebody's out of state.
Out of state.
Yeah, out of state or incapacitated or whatsoever.
Well, again, there's that word incapacitated. So when we say incapacitated, stepped down, arrested,
Right,
you
well,
know,
this is,
like
oh, yeah.
sick.
but that applies to everybody, so like, it's not gonna be this, if the speaker gets arrested with the governor, well, guess what, both of them are incapacitated now. So it's the next person, and it's not I supported this bill because I didn't find it offensive. I found it was concerning that we didn't have someone in charge of the state in some circumstances that have happened in the past. And the whole point here is not to change the order of succession. We would still go through that process to replace the governor
I thought
if
that-
there was something that happened. But if it's the governor's taking a trip, the speaker's gonna be there too, now what?
So I thought that the majority leader in the Senate, the last time that this had happened, Mooney actually was in charge of the state. So I thought, so you're saying there was never a process, like that was never stated. Like I
Yeah,
always
that's what
thought-
it is. I think they relied only on the constitutional framework that says governor, speaker of the house. And when Mooney was in charge, he wasn't really in charge, which is why the need for the bill, in my view.
Yeah.
But I also do think that there ought to be a constitutional amendment to do it the right way.
Yeah.
But sometimes there's a half measure,
Yeah.
can I tell you?
Yeah.
Of all the terrible things that they try and do to us, that was like not even on the radar.
And my third-
That was the least of our worries.
That was the
Yes.
least concerning
third-
thing that
yeah.
they did.
My third question is that President Trump put out an executive order for election equipment. And what he is saying is that we need to use VVSG 2.0 compliant equipment. So far, I mean, and I had this discussion with both of you, our election management system in Connecticut has no certification records, and it has no audit records, which violates federal and state statute. Recently, the Secretary of State has started training of register of voters with equipment from ENS. So I guess LHS lost a contract. They brought in ENS, which is a subsidiary of Dominion. And they are using laptops with removable click drives that come from Serbia. And I can give you all documentation on this. And basically, they have run training with the Register of Voters on this equipment that has no certification. And the audit records of them, they do generate CVRs or cast vote records. However, I just don't know who programs the cards, okay, that these are
It's gonna be
click
UConn
drives.
again.
Well, it's a click drive that goes into it, again,
Yeah.
that violates VVSG, it
Yes.
violates FISMA. Like, I could go through the federal laws that it violates. So I'm at a loss, okay, on how the Secretary of State keeps on just doing this, violating.
Because they can.
Until
That's
it's
why,
challenged in
again,
court.
I don't disagree with anything you're saying. We've
Right.
brought up a lot of this, but the fact of the matter is that they're just gonna keep doing it until there is
Until they can't.
so someone stops them
I
somehow.
have documentation for
Yes.
both of you from United Sovereign.
Yep, good.
And just so you know that federal HAVA complaints are going in. The DOJ already has the 2024 scorecard from them. And I called the governor's office today and told him that he will be getting certified letters, and there's a lot of people that are gonna be served with stuff that's coming down. The fraud that I mean, when you guys read this, yeah, and what I would ask both of you is, our team would like to meet with whoever would, Democrats and Republicans, both, I don't really care, because it's a bipartisan. The thing is that everybody needs to realize that everybody's civil rights right now are being violated, Democrats, unaffiliated, and Republicans. And we need to come together and look at this and address it. And I realize you're lawmakers, you don't, like you told me before, Rob, you don't, prosecute, you are, that's not
We
your
debate
job.
and vote on policy, that's, and
Right,
again, we're limited in
and I
that.
understand that,
Yep.
but, this really needs to stop. We are going to be going around within the next 5 months and presenting our data to every single town hall in Connecticut, all
I'm looking forward to that.
169
Can you give us a
towns.
taste? Is there some fraud that you can share with this group?
Oh, absolutely. So we have complaints for 2020, 2022, and 2024. The HAVA complaints for 2020 relate to no certification and no audit records.
Right.
And that violates HAVA, that violates.
Right, I mean, we know that they're not,
ADSG.
we know that they're not
Okay.
following the law, but I'm
Right.
just looking for some kind of
You want
example.
numbers?
No, I'm looking for fraud, like somebody who wasn't supposed
So-
to vote or voted.
Oh,
Or,
we have plenty of those. So we have a lot of double voters. We have people with multiple voter IDs. In HAVA, okay, you can only have one voter ID and it follows you.
right,
We
of
have
course.
multiple people with multiple voter IDs. We have multiple people that voted twice.
Okay.
We have multiple dead people who voted. And per
This is the
HAVA,
information that I wanna see though.
oh yeah.
If I have that
We're gonna-
information,
yes.
I will go to the TV cameras today.
Good.
The thing is, but that's what I need, is I gotta be able to say that.
I'm more than happy to sit with you.
What we are doing now, so there's two parts to this. So we have Sovereign, United Sovereigns, but we also have a data team that is drilling down on each district within Connecticut. And we are drilling down on actually where the fraud is. Okay, now I hate to say fraud. I wanna say
Inconsistencies?
invalidity, okay, because I don't know who's doing this, I don't know what it is, but per federal law, we are allowed 10 errors on our voter rolls. 10. That's
10
per
too many.
population. That's 10. In 2020, we had 221, and the SEC ruled on that and
Yeah.
said we had 221.
Of course.
So,
These people have no fear. This is the problem with everything that's happening. They have no fear of the voters, they have no fear of the electorate, they have no fear of the courts. They don't. Because most of the judges have been appointed by the same legislature.
yeah.
So they don't fear what, people like Linda or us either. I mean, they just don't. Because we're shouting from the rooftops, trying to point out the things that they're doing all the time, and yet they are reelected, they stay in power, and they're able, by virtue of being in control of all the constitutional offices and all of the state bureaucracies and every state agency from DOT to the DMV to DEEP to you name, they got them all. So every bureaucrat in the state answers to a Democratic governor and a Democratic legislature. That's it. And until that changes, we have the ability to dig in and find this information, which is hidden from us effectively.
Right.
And they control everything, including their willingness to cooperate with FOIA requests. I mean, it's just unbelievable.
Yeah.
You have one party rule. It is, what's
40 years.
What really kills me is that we had this no kings garbage last week. It just kills me. We are the no kings people, okay? The country was founded by people that believed in the right and power of the individual to stand up and have their rights protected by government and to have true representation, to actually vote for the people on local and state and federal level to represent them. And it's the Democrats that don't believe in that. They're the ones taking the rights of local planning and zoning away. They're the ones taking parents' rights away about what books belong in the school. These are the things we just talked about. And they control our election process, and they don't answer to complaints. They don't answer to court challenges. They don't answer to anybody or anything. And that's because they can get away with it because they keep winning elections. Maybe.
And they'll answer to the federal government.
And
Well, we're
they,
hoping.
So
We're
I'll just
hoping.
give you some numbers, okay, in 2022, there were 132,547 ballot errors, which if proven is 132,547 felonies. And there's a further breakdown of the number for you.
Yeah.
The 2024, I gave you the 2022 scorecard. The 2024 I cannot release yet because it is at the it's at the DOJ. Once I get permission to release that, I will give that to you.
Yep.
But just so you know, around 60,000 more votes were counted than people that voted. Okay?
Mhm.
So that means that there was.
According to your data, I mean, and I don't want to.
According to the Secretary of State's data. This is not my data,
Understood? Okay.
this is data from the Secretary of State. Okay, so nothing was injected in any of this.
Okay,
And the people that did this are forensic auditors. These are ex-military people. We have probably about, I wanna say 4,000 volunteers. And it's been a rough 4 years.
Have you
of this.
presented any of this to the news media or anything like that?
Not yet, but it is being rolled out as soon as I have the violations are filed. We are in the middle of writing that,
good.
and it's,
Well, we will certainly be happy to draw more attention to this stuff.
so I would like to, like I said, we can do a presentation for you if you can get whoever would like to see the data.
Yeah.
And again, all of this is gonna be formally filed with the SEC, the DOJ. Well, the 2024 has already been done, but,
Just so you know, we have
Attorney
asked,
General.
we have asked the Department of Justice, and I did in Trump's first term also write to the Department of Justice, asking for help to investigate our election concerns in the state. And we enumerated many of the same concerns because Fight Voter Fraud had already presented us with a lot of the same kind of concepts, double voting and, you know, lack of.
Well, and interesting, all the Democrats will say there's no voter fraud, no inconsistencies.
Despite the fact that it's been documented
Right.
over and over again.
Right,
And there's been people, you know, who have been fined repeatedly over it.
yeah, and there was nothing passed this year into law that would strengthen into the voter integrity. There was nothing, the monitor in Bridgeport was the
Yes,
only
they've
thing.
refunded the
I
election
mean,
monitor.
just
that's
for
it.
an example, like in Yukon, the students come and they have same-day registration. There's no way to verify,
we are very
one,
interested.
if
in
that
that.
student is registered in another town, another state. If that student is even a
Or
US
country.
citizen, we don't even know, they could be an exchange student. There's no document, there's no way to
Well,
check
they
that.
did pass a law in the budget, again, we should talk about that
Okay,
next.
since we're doing
But
that,
yes,
let's
they-
talk about the
yes,
election stuff.
But
in
they
the
did
budget.
add into the budget an election policy that basically says for same-day registration, that all you need is to bring someone else who vouches for you. That's
right.
it,
Yeah,
that's it.
Rob, he
That's
says, he lives where he does.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right, I'm an American citizen, I'm eligible to vote, because Gale says so.
Right,
I mean, it's just like, what? But
They
that's what they
passed
did,
that.
they passed that law. Yeah, it's amazing, it's amazing. Yeah, I mean, the whole idea behind same-day registration is a joke, and we've been fighting that since the beginning. I mean, register to vote, how hard is that? But anyway, so let's talk about the budget.
yeah, so the budget passed, I believe the increase in spending was about 2 billion, am I about right, 2 billion?
No, it's more than that.
Two
A lot more than that. Yeah.
2.7, I think it was in the
It's a
first
lot
year.
more than that. Oh, in the first year,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah, yeah.
yes,
Oh,
oh yeah,
okay.
yeah, oh yeah, I'm
Sorry.
talking about we have a 2-year budget.
Yeah.
So that's-
Increase was about 12-14%, I think, overall.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
close to
I was talking about the first
14% compounded over 2 years. Can you imagine that?
Right.
Over the next 2 years, a 14% increase. The budget since 2011, when I was first elected, is virtually twice as much as it was.
What is
Can you
that
imagine?
gonna do
Just
to
in
state
15 years.
taxes?
What's that?
I mean, what is that gonna do to state tax, I mean, what is that gonna
Yes.
do?
Yeah.
So that means there's gonna be a 7% increase in taxes?
Yeah, it's about 5.5 in the first year and about 5.5 in the second year, but that compounded is 14%.
And what are they paying for out of that budget? What are the increases?
Yeah.
Healthcare for illegal immigrants.
Yep.
Illegal alien, more healthcare for them.
We're at geo fund, please give
We're
me that
paying
list.
Oh,
for,
it's
we're
It's
paying
right
for
in the budget.
people come from out of state for gender affirming care surgeries. We're paying for that. What else?
Oh, yeah, gender surgery.
Gender
Yes, oh,
surgeries,
yeah.
we have gender dysphoria, we're paying for all of that. I talked about the illegal, the childcare. You know,
Yeah, so yeah, free childcare.
free childcare,
Free
I think it was like $300 million that was put in
$300 million,
into,
yes.
for childcare. So everybody in the state is really, basically based on your income, are gonna get free childcare. It
Yeah, I
is-
mean, some of these things are nice, but I mean, can people afford it? Can senior citizens who are having to make decisions about buying their medication or paying their property taxes
Yeah.
afford to have that much of an increase? Of course they can.
Yeah.
You know, this is what we're fighting for, is trying to protect people because we're right now taxed, you know, between the federal government and your local and state taxes, you probably pay 50% or more of your income in taxes. It's ridiculous. We shouldn't live in a society like that. And every day we work to try and shrink government and try and rein it in. I've been there, so we vote for a budget every 2 years, usually in the first year of the biennium. And then the second year, they come back with some sort of fix-it document, which, you know, in good years where there's plenty of money hanging around, they find ways to spend more,
Right.
you know? Or if they're having a tough time, they find a way to borrow it or put off the responsibility or obligation into the future. And that's one of the big problems we have, is that we have long-term debt obligations in the state of Connecticut that are of enormous magnitude. Every person sitting in this room owes something like $45,000 each,
Yeah.
you know, in debt, you know, based on government spending. It's ridiculous. But
And you have to remember, all the money that we received on the federal level during COVID, that money was given out for additional programs, but that money is gone.
Is there any, because I heard they were going to pull back some money. So in other words, there's been something like $11 billion that hasn't been spent in COVID money, and the government was gonna pull that back, and I was just wondering, is any of it sitting anywhere, like they found money? Somehow they found some money, some sitting somewhere.
isn't it funny how they
that-
find money? Is that like, it was like under the couch cushions? God, where'd you find the 11 bill? I mean, come on. It's ridiculous how they find money. But yes, there was money allocated under the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA.
It wasn't a lot.
Yeah, but you know, a lot of things happened. Okay, so first off, they created all of these new programs because they had all of this free money because the federal government was printing it like crazy and sending it to blue states to help blue state legislatures and governors get elected. And they were just spending money like it was hand over fist. And now, so fast forward, and now the federal government's not giving us this funding for these programs, so they have to make a decision. You know, I mean, do you say we don't have this money anymore, we have to end this program now? Or do you find a way to fund it? And that's what they're doing. They're gonna continue most of these programs, and they're gonna fund them, and they're gonna find money. I don't know exactly how that works. I wish I did. You need somebody who's,
Forensic auditor.
yeah. I don't have 11 billion like under the seat of my car.
Yeah,
Can
right.
we get Doge up here? to
That's
help us
what we
out?
need it.
We need
That
that.
would be.
We have a Connecticut Doge.
We definitely
In order to
need
have that, you gotta be empowered, effectively. I mean, that's not to say that people can't, you know, investigate and look at things, but to really know what's going on, you gotta be inside.
Peel back the
You know,
onion. You
when
really
we
have
get the
to-
budget document, the first 50 or so pages are just line items with numbers.
Right.
Oh, 45 million for this state agency, 32 million for this. It's like, I don't know what this money's for. How do I know whether they're actually spending it wisely, or they're wasting it, or people are getting paid for sitting at home? You know, it's like, I got no idea. So without being actually in the majority, where you have the ability to communicate with your agency commissioners and hear what they're saying about how the agencies run and finding out what people are doing, it's very difficult.
And
from the
nobody's
minority
checking those
standpoint.
NGOs. They're not checking
Isn't
it.
there a Republican auditor and a Democrat?
Yes.
auditor?
Well, and they do audit the state agencies, but they're still relying on what they're told.
It goes like this, you have them come back to the majority, so the Democrat legislators come back to their leadership and say, look, there's an organization in my town, whatever, it's a nonprofit or whatever, they need money. And nobody's looking into that organization. They're not vetting that organization before they go ahead and put that line number in there.
So for the special session, the governor calls a special session. I've heard in the past, he said, okay, I'm gonna get together with the Democrats. Republicans aren't allowed in this session. And we're just gonna hammer something out.
Oh, yeah.
Why doesn't the Democrats just say, we're eliminating the Republican Party? Because that's essentially what they're doing.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think we're mixing two different things there. I mean, certainly, we are gonna be there to debate and vote on whatever legislation happens and is brought. But you're right, they're gonna have a meeting on their own.
Yeah.
They're gonna plan it and work it all out without Republicans at the table, more than likely.
Yeah, with no representation for
Right.
anybody.
We will, I mean,
Republicans, independents.
Once they draft it, they'll come to us, depending on what it is, obviously.
yeah, well, they'll try and pick off some
Yeah.
weaker Republicans is what they will try and do. Because they love the idea of being able to say that this was bipartisan, even if one person votes for it.
Right. Have a lot of that.
And we have a few of those one persons.
Yes, we do, unfortunately.
We got a couple of those one persons in the Senate and
we have
even more of them in the House.
More of them in the House.
It's a big discussion that we have all the time about what to do about some of the Republicans that we serve with that vote with the Democrats on a regular basis. And in my view,
It's challenging.
you know, there's no benefit to keeping them around. I mean, you might say, oh, we need to have as many Republicans as we can, you know, so that we can stop whatever we can. But when they outnumber us 2-1, having one or two votes the other way doesn't make any difference. I'd much rather have people that are willing to stand up and, you know, for their principles and fight for them.
I mean, for the most part, we do, but there are few
Well, they're
stragglers.
not Republicans,
There are
so
few stragglers
They're
here.
rhinos.
they're not Republicans.
But they are registered as Republicans, they were elected as Republicans, and then they caucus with us. We have our behind the scenes meetings about how we're gonna tackle certain legislation, what bills we're gonna, fight, what amendments we're gonna run, and those people are part of those conversations.
Yeah,
They
they
want
probably
the
go
inside
right
scoop.
Yeah, and sometimes I don't trust whether or not that information's actually getting, to the other side.
Yeah.
It's like the president, the Democrats are all upset because the president was able to keep the secret about the Iran bombing. But that's because he didn't tell any Democrats, so it didn't get leaked out.
So,
Keep these questions coming, come on.
Other questions? Gotta be something on your mind.
What are important issues?
There was a bill against that came up against homeschoolers, and they weren't even allowed to go to, or they weren't gonna allow any residents,
Yes,
state residents, to come out and speak
yes.
about that. And it still got defeated, but it's another
Yes, yes,
another opportunity for them to take away parental rights.
yes, of
Yeah.
course.
So,
Yes.
so there wasn't a bill put forward on that. What they did is they had an educational forum at the, like a public, not even, I wouldn't even call it public hearing.
Informational.
An
hearing.
informational hearing
That's the
on
term.
it.
It's not
And I
official,
believe
not even an official
It's not even an
hearing.
official, right.
Almost like test the waters.
Yes.
If I'm not mistaken, then they put a committee together, or they
Yes.
put a group of people together. That issue, I fear, will come up next
Yes,
session.
absolutely.
It will absolutely come up that they want to take away the rights. They want to put the hammer down on homeschoolers.
There are certain constituencies that are a thorn in the side to the majority Democrats. Gun owners, homeschoolers,
Yes.
vaccine deniers.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Yeah.
COVID.
Right, exactly.
Okay,
So I mean,
yeah.
all of those groups, their attitude is we want to chase you out of the state. I mean, frankly, that's why they do the policy that they do. They want to encourage people, there'll be more room for their illegal alien friends, if that's the case, maybe.
Right. You're not gonna vote for us, you have no business.
That's right, but that's what they want to do. They purposely propose and they float extremely hostile legislation because they're trying to encourage people to bail on Connecticut. But we gotta stay and fight, we have to.
And listen, we have a totally different philosophy than the Democrats do. And it's unfortunate we do these town halls and we never have anything really, really good to report that's going to move the needle and make your lives a lot easier. We never do because we have a total different worldview than the Democrats do.
Right, and they're moving bad legislation. I mean, look,
They are.
we always throw these caveats in, 70% of the legislation that we pass out of the legislature is
Right.
unanimous. We
But
vote
it's-
and agree on a great many things, but they're not the big issues. They're
Right,
not
they're
the
not.
issues about the size of government or tackling election fraud.
They're not gonna change your life.
Or fighting our
They're not.
sky-high electric rates,
Right.
or, shrinking government. I mean,
Right.
those are where we are gonna fight over things, and there's a real divide.
What about water? I hear something's going on with water, that they
Oh,
are trying to
yeah.
get
The,
a centralized, like they're gonna sell water to somebody so that then they can increase our water charges?
There is something going on, yes. We've had some legislation that basically is designed to force Eversource to sell off Connecticut water, which they own.
yeah,
And by virtue of that, it can be purchased by someone else, and allegedly that's gonna result in an increase in rates, but I don't know if that's
that was in a
100%.
special session, I think, last year.
That was in a special session bill.
So
That was
they'll control
a
they'll control our electricity, they will control our water costs. Yeah, the whole electricity thing is.
that
like,
water,
that's-
that thing with the divestiture of the water was in the car tax bill that we
Yes,
brought in,
last
where they
year.
raised our car taxes. The same people that keep alleging that they're going to get rid of the car tax raised our car tax.
It's going to come
Don't ever
to,
forget it.
yeah, it's going to come to a point how much people can take, right? The state of Connecticut increases their spending, well, that money has to come from somewhere. Your towns increase spending because they have insurance costs and payroll. Someone has to pay for that money. So it's at some point, your car taxes go up, your mill rate goes up, your taxes that you pay the state go up, the government. It's going to bust at some point, and I hope when people are just going to wake up and say they've had enough, because I don't know how much you can take. I mean, how much more are people going to have to pay before they say, okay, this is it, enough is enough?
Well, I think people are at that point, Gale.
I hope so.
Well, they're driving out people that can't afford to live here, and then they're saying,
Yeah.
why is everything so expensive?
Right,
It's like, well,
yeah,
that's why everything is so expensive, because if you were on a modest income, you can't even afford to live in Connecticut.
and
So
it's-
people are
and-
competing over those resources.
And for a lot of people on fixed income, seniors, $50 a month is a lot of
It
money.
is a lot of money.
It's a lot of money.
We
to
didn't
a lot
finish
of
what we
people.
wanted to say about the budget, which was,
okay.
the budget ended up being 700 pages long, by the way.
Yes,
And of course, the house, you guys got it with how much notice?
6 hours.
The 6 hours notice, that's how
We
much.
got it at 4 in the
Here
morning,
you go,
we
it's a stack
started
of paper
debating
like
it.
this, you know?
4
Here
AM
you
we
go.
got it, we started debating it. at
Still
10.
steaming from the copier, you know, and you gotta vote on it now.
Yeah, right.
That's what they give you.
So as
And it's
people are
because-
talking, you're reading it. you
That's
know?
because they don't care if we vote for it. They're like, we got the votes, you vote no if you want, you know, go ahead, representative.
Whatever.
That's their attitude. But what the other thing about this budget document is that we did such a good job as members of the minority stopping the bad policy.
Yeah.
We really put the brakes on them. We filibustered, we offered amendments, we made it extremely difficult so they couldn't even get their bills across the finish line. So what they did is they just stuffed it all in the budget.
Put it in the budget.
They put it in the implementer.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah, well,
like they
this
do every year.
This year, the budget and implementer were together, to their credit.
Right.
Remember, I was describing the budget is really a spreadsheet of numbers. The implementer is the language that goes with it, that's supposed to set the policy for how the money is spent. And sometimes they, in a dastardly way, in my view, I always want to use that word, they do the budget separate. It's like, well, how could you vote for the budget with just
And not know what it
but
is.
not have the policy? I mean, what the heck are you voting on? Voting on a spreadsheet that means nothing? But they do that sometimes. But this year, to their credit, they did put the documents together. But not to their credit, they took what was the budget, which would have been about 50 pages, and they added another 600 some odd pages to it.
Right.
And they just stuffed everything under the sun in
That
that
they
bill,
couldn't pass.
including one of the most controversial labor bills that we had all session, which was a bill about prevailing wage. Which, if you don't know what prevailing wage is, basically that is a requirement for towns in particular to pay a certain very expensive wage for union labor for infrastructure projects. So if you're gonna build a school or a bridge, you gotta pay union labor, and sometimes you're paying 3 or 4 times what you might pay any other contractor to do the job. That's prevailing wage. And there are requirements for what jobs fall under prevailing wage, and Republicans have been fighting for years, me in particular as the ranking member of the Labor Committee, to try and change those requirements, to limit the requirements on a small town like Wolcott to have to pay prevailing wage, because we're all paying for that in our property taxes, right? What they did this year is they had this bill, which I stopped them throughout the whole committee process. Every day went by in the Senate, they're threatening to run this bill, and I'm like, you run this bill, I'm shutting this place down, it's not going anywhere, I will talk for 2 days, blah, 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 and they didn't. And they didn't. They didn't. You know, whether I was bluffing or not, it doesn't matter. They didn't do it, right? And they, so they took and they stuffed it in the budget. And what this language does is says that towns, including Wolcott, not only do they have to pay prevailing wage for the job, they also have to pay prevailing wage for anything that is part of the job that is done off-site. So if they're building a school and the HVAC system is built in a factory somewhere, they got to pay them the prevailing wage labor rate too, which is going to make the same job cost twice as much.
Right.
And also, it's going to cause businesses to leave the state of Connecticut.
Well, that's the end result.
That's the
Yeah.
end result.
I didn't know, I thought that didn't get out and they stuck it in the.
Yeah.
And they stuck that in the budget.
So pretty soon there will be no jobs at all in Connecticut. What you are going to have is a total welfare state. You will own nothing and you will be happy. It is the UN agenda of
You'll either be
2030.
filthy rich and paying the tax bill.
Yeah.
That's it. Or you're going to be receiving benefits. Nobody in the middle.
People in the middle, we don't.
That's what you'll have.
Prevailing wage wouldn't, like typically if they're gonna do a project now, like build a school, they'd go out for 3 bids or whatever. Get those bids in, and the best bid is gonna be the prevailing wage.
Well,
They're not saying prevailing wage, they're saying we want you
Well,
pay a
the company
union
they hire, those people have to be paid prevailing wage.
the prevailing wage is set by the government. It is not the amount of a bid. Those bids will have to pay their labor, whatever the prevailing wage is.
You own a company, you're doing work for the town.
whether they're union or not.
You have to pay your employees
Yes,
prevailing
yes.
wage. So
Yes.
that's you have no choice but to increase the cost of the job that you're doing to the town, right?
So
Now
there-
we're gonna have to pay.
There's no
for it.
capitalism,
There's no
Right,
capital.
right.
There's no
That's
freedom
exactly
at all.
what-
Throw that out the
that's
window.
exactly what
Right.
it is.
it's
And
communism.
then we end up paying for it.
Whatever, yeah, we're in communism.
It's ridiculous, prevailing wage.
Yeah,
Ridiculous.
and all it does effectively, I mean, again, if you are
Raise the cost.
confident, that you're gonna do a better job, then convince the town government to go with your company. You know, we're gonna do a better quality job, you know, whatever, convince them. But the idea that we have to pay extra, which basically locks out, and again, it also locks out other non-union contractors because the paperwork just becomes so complicated.
Right.
To even track the prevailing wage for all these different workers and all that.
And that's a big mandate put on the municipalities. The municipalities don't want to do that. You talk to any mayor out there, be like,
Oh yeah, they wanna get rid of
are you
prevailing
kidding
wage.
me? They would save their taxpayers a ton of money.
Yes,
It's
and of course,
also
there's
just
binding
small
arbitration
businesses.
as well.
Yes.
Binding arbitration means basically that, you know, when there's a dispute between labor and a government, a municipality, for example, that means that the town loses. Because essentially what happens is if there's a dispute, it goes to a binding arbitrator, which is some person who will decide who's right. And that almost always falls on the side of the labor.
So let me just ask a question, like say town hall here needed a new HVAC system. And they put this out to bid and 3 companies bid on it and that one was a small business, one was like a really large corporation and another one was, you know, full of union workers. So the small business actually gave the town a better deal. When they come in to do this, that small business would have to pay the people that are employed by them.
The wage
The
set by the
wage.
Department of Labor, yes, the prevailing wage.
Craziness.
So they'd have to bid according to that too. So that means their bid is not going to be better.
So everything
It's not
that
going to
costs
be
the
less.
town more money.
Oh, yeah.
And generally
They've been
speaking,
doing
they
that for
don't
years,
bid.
decades. And I'm pretty sure that those people that they contract with have to be union.
They don't have to be, but the problem is that unless you are an experienced large union contracting firm, you don't even know how to complete the paperwork to do a
Well,
prevailing wage bid. This is the problem.
Especially if you're getting money from the state, if you're getting reimbursed a percentage for the project, absolutely the people you hire have to be union.
Yeah, and I got nothing against the union either, but
No.
we shouldn't be setting their wages. They should be
Yeah.
negotiating that. That's the whole point.
Right.
Part of the problem with the legislature these days under Democratic control and with the Labor Committee, which Gale joins me on,
Yes.
is that they don't even believe in prevailing wage. The Democrats are over there negotiating on behalf of the unions. They're just putting things that should be negotiated into law, so it doesn't have to be negotiated anymore. Over and over, and again, I mean, the prevailing wage bit, striking workers, I mean, like, if you wanna negotiate that you get paid unemployment when you go on strike, well, then negotiate that in your labor, contract. Don't it would pass it as a law?
Why is government?
This is how far they go when it comes to wages. The community out there that are special needs, they want to pay them minimum wage.
Yeah.
Right? The parents for those children are outraged because a lot of those kids are working because they need to get out, right? They need socialization.
Mm-hmm.
And if a business was forced to pay them minimum wage, they would lose their jobs. So there was a big backlash on that. There was a lot of talk on that. And actually, I saw that in my committee as well, and Human Services talk a lot about that, is that the parents, they don't want that. They don't want their child who has special needs to be paid minimum wage. They want them to just work because they know that they will end up, the employers, they could not afford it.
Right, of course.
There are a lot
Those
of-
opportunities go away, yes.
Those opportunities go
And
away.
then what would happen is you wouldn't have.
It's not just children either, it's,
Well,
they're
adults, yeah,
they're
it's
adults
still
too.
adults,
There's a lot of programs set
A
up,
lot, yeah.
to give those opportunities, yeah.
Yeah. But they don't care. All they think about is everybody's gotta get a fair wage. Everybody's
Yeah,
gotta
and
get a
they
living
paint
wage.
every argument is
Yeah.
painted as employer versus employee, and we
Right.
are forever bringing up, that doesn't have to be like that.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of places where people work together, and employees recognize that if they help the company grow and succeed, they're going to benefit as well. I mean, that's how things actually work in the real world, but they don't see it that way. They wanna create this constant divide, this fight, and they do the same thing in so many other ways too. Landlords versus tenants, and they're doing it all the time based on math. It's a calculation for politics, for electoral success. There's always more employees than there are employers, so we'll just screw all the employers and to engender favor with employees. And then when the Republicans, just in the sense of fairness, go and say, this doesn't make sense, we can accuse them of defending the employers and big business and corporations, that's what they do. That's why Republicans have that tag to them all the time. So we're defending business. We're not defending business, we're defending fairness, and you're doing something insane. You know, we want freedom for the parties to negotiate the terms. And, you know, one of the worst things that's ever happened really is the $15 minimum wage, which is no longer $15, it's like $18. But what it has done is it's broken our economy in so many ways. I mean, it really has. Once you start paying people $15, $16, $17, $18 an hour for menial jobs, who's gonna do the other jobs that used to pay the $18?
Right.
Like working for the Arc of Southington, taking care of people with developmental disabilities. The answer is nobody. And those people are freaking out. The managers and owners of that company are getting their hands dirty doing it themselves now because they can't find any employees. Because who wants to do that for $18 an hour when you can go down and work at Starbucks for the same thing? You want me to empty bedpans or serve coffee? I'm gonna take the coffee.
Right.
And that's what they've done. They've broken our economy in so many ways by dictating wages.
Right.
Wages are supposed to be determined between employers and employees based on need and what the market will bear. And when you start to fix numbers in an economy, it's always gonna break. And that's who they are, power and control.
Dan,
Dan the man.
Two things. One,
Showing off those huge biceps.
yeah. I didn't ring to fit me today, so I ripped up the suits. The religious exemption and VA credits for housing. How do those end up?
religious
Is it
exemption for,
veteran disability or on disability? Are they getting their full deduction at their towns?
Yeah, the tax exemption.
Tax
I'm
exemption?
talking about the property tax exemption.
Right, and then the religious exemptions, did they do away with that? Now you don't get it anymore?
related for school?
For vaccine,
Oh,
shots,
yeah,
school,
no,
all
there-
that stuff.
that still stands, the religious exemption, there is no more.
They got rid of it.
They got rid of it a couple years ago.
But that's
Yes.
only for schools.
That's
Okay,
for
so
school kids,
over
yes.
18, you can still file a religious exemption for work
Well,
or
they got rid of
college. It's up to the college or your work on whether they
They
give
do,
that
right.
to you or not.
Right. And they got rid of it for state employees too.
I filed one, they didn't get rid of me.
So they don't have to accept it.
They don't have to.
So you can apply and have a religious exemption, or you can't?
Cannot,
You can, but for schools, they don't have to honor
they won't honor
it. Yeah, they won't
I don't-
honor
they
it.
won't
In
honor
the
it
state,
for school.
yes.
So you can't have a religious,
it, correct, not in school.
what about the property tax deduction for veterans who are on disability?
Yeah, so it's a
It's
complex topic.
It's
You know, we
very
passed a bill to fix it because there were a lot of problems with the original underlying bill. As you know, they did not include a tax credit for the property itself, only for the structure on the property, so that's been fixed. So now you get credit for both the property and the land.
Right,
But they did limit it only to folks that are 100% permanent and totally disabled. There was some confusion over when the way the original bill was written by towns, interpreting it to say that you could still, from the VA, have something saying you're permanent and totally disabled, but then they would give you a score saying you're 70% permanent or totally disabled. And the original intent of the original law was not to offer the benefit. And many towns did. But that was clarified in this bill, so some people do stand to lose that benefit, I think. It depends on whether the town gave it to them to begin with.
and they expanded to survive, to spouses.
Yeah, but overall, they did expand the benefits dramatically. Now it covers property, now it covers surviving spouse, going back some period of time.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a tough thing. It passed unanimously in both chambers. None of us liked it. It was like, we're gonna give you all these good things, but we're gonna go back and fix a couple things that we got wrong that might take it away from some people. You know, there was no way to vote against it though. We had to live with what we got, because basically, Dan, at the end of the day, the problem is that the state is putting a mandate on towns, which I don't care for to begin with, to say that you have to offer this credit or discount on property taxes just to a group of people. But the town has to make it up. And you know, the more you tell the town they have to give up more income, they're gonna raise taxes on everyone else. So the towns were really barking about how much the underlying original law was going to affect their bottom lines. So this language was written kind of as, we're gonna expand these benefits as much as we possibly can without harming the towns.
And I believe that some of them, one of them, part of that was a municipal option.
Yes, there may be a municipal option for some part of those benefits, yeah.
So there's really never conversations that I've heard in the last few years to actually cut expenses so you could actually reduce taxes.
Well,
So I've
towns,
heard nothing that we're gonna cut 10%, we're gonna 5%. I mean, let's just talk about, she just brought up there, Doge, right? Well,
Yep.
USA, what do they find? They're over $1 billion in things going to NGOs and nonprofits that Democrats actually are on board of directors. So,
Yeah.
so you talked about fraud, how many people were fraud? You actually have names of those people who voted twice?
Yes.
Well, those names should be out in the public. Why
I
are
agree.
those
Well,
Yeah.
but
Forget
again,
about waiting to make a report. If you know John Smith voted 3 times in 5 towns,
John
why
Smith
isn't that
voted
published?
many times.
So why isn't that published? Why are we waiting and not telling people? And why are they not being arrested? So the other
Right.
part is, I don't have
There's
a
a
question.
legal
I just,
process to make it effective.
it's
Yeah,
not
so
a legal
Dan,
process.
Dan,
It's a
you're-
way, it's not a legal process. It's a way to take away our freedoms, and we try to paint it in a different way.
Well-
Everything that you've talked about is a way to take away our freedom. If we don't
Yes.
have money,
Yes.
we can't fight. We can't get it.
Your frustration is our frustration.
Yeah.
I would cut the state budget, the federal budget, the town budget. No
Just-
problem.
And you have the same people voting for those people.
Yeah.
The problem is that like in a small, and Wolcott is a well-run town. I mean, there's not a lot to cut. The problem is that they have built-in raises for all of the town employees, for the Board of Education, everything else.
Healthcare costs.
Yeah, I mean,
insurance,
it's
yeah.
hard. And you know, what happens with the local elected officials, and I don't wanna pick on anybody, but I'll defend the fact that, you know, who do they hear from? You know, when the budget for the town is coming up, who shows up here? The parents of the kids in the school system saying, don't you dare cut the school budget $1. The people that are like, look, they're asking for a $600,000 increase, we're willing to give them $100,000. That's not good enough. They are vilified on social media. They are attacked. They are, you know, called every name in the book. They're not even cutting anything. They're just reducing the increase. And they're vilified in every way.
The parents don't understand, is what's it called, the state, the guaranteed minimum?
Minimum budget
Yes.
requirement.
For
the
the
MBR, yes.
Board of Education.
Yes.
Well, in town, our superintendent put up a beautiful graph. For over 10 years, we've lost almost 1,000 students.
Right.
And yet, the budget has gone up nearly $8.5 to $9 million.
Well, there are ways to do that, by the way,
So
because
wait, 1,000 people, $18,000 a student. We're talking nearly $100 million. Where did that money get spent on? Because they also said that we're losing teachers because we can't give them money. Well, who did they give that money to?
well, that's a
There's
good question
about
for
1,000
the,
kids here.
that's a good question for the Board of Education.
They don't answer that
Okay,
question.
well, and my
I've asked that question.
the
They don't
point of
answer
my
that question.
remarks to you, Dan, about this whole thing is that those are the questions that should be asked. And I can tell you that at least the Republican members of the Council and Board of Ed would appreciate those questions.
Yeah.
Because it would give them the ability to push back on the people that are saying you don't cut anything.
I've been
But
here to
I will
ask
tell
no
you-
questions.
Okay, well,
I've
you're
been
not
here
the
and
only
I've
one.
actually told them that they shouldn't allow the bond package to be done in July, should be done in November, and they agreed to have it on July 15th, when nobody's gonna vote. They already have a budget of almost $40 million to fix a few leaks. Well, the town crew could do, they don't listen. The pressure from having 100 parents here talk about the fact that there is no budget cut. Don't cut my kids' stuff. Well, they hired one psychiatrist for every single school. What's wrong with our kids? We have to have a psychiatrist at every school
That's a
now?
whole other-
That's over $1 million a
So
month.
this is
Where did
great,
that come from?
But we wanna talk about
They didn't
state
tell us
level
that,
stuff, but I
exactly.
totally agree with you and keep doing what you're doing. Because that's what we need. We need voices on the other side, you know, that are fighting for the taxpayers.
But you know what people say on the RTC? That because I fight for our freedoms and I want the taxes to be fair, that I have a bad attitude. That my attitude is not good to be an elected official, because I want to fight for people. You know how disgusted I am with how some people act, the hatred. When somebody tries to do something good, just take it to Trump if you want. He doesn't do everything right. Nobody does everything right. It's the hatred that comes out of these people's mouths that say so many bad things that are not even true. And then the media just, oh, he did this, he did that. I am up to here. Because I have come to
Dan,
council meetings,
look,
and you know I've been
You don't
around.
have to explain to
It's
us
not
that
weird.
politics is frustrating and that there's a lot of misinformation and people who are saying bad things about people for no reason all the time. We know,
You
trust
And
me.
it's not the bad things
Okay.
that I worry about. It's the hatred in the language.
Yeah.
You could be angry with
Yeah, they
someone,
wanna
and that's
vilify you,
okay.
yes.
You could disagree,
We
and
get the
that's
same
okay.
thing. Gale
But
and
it's
I
the
are the
hatred.
tip
It's
of
the
the
target.
spear. We're
like
the tip of the spear for shrinking government and reducing costs
I know.
and protecting taxpayers. So we get all that same vitriol. You just gotta let it roll over because we have a lot of people that support us too.
You know, it's a great
And so do
idea
you.
for the people in town to do, because I know there's always a lot of questions about their local town budgets, is maybe get to your town council or your party to get them to come up and do something like we do, so you can have an interaction and you can ask questions,
Right.
because I served 10 years on the town council here, so I know you don't have that opportunity to go back and forth with people that are in town, because you're sitting back there and you just can't.
Well, you also can't get to the meetings because
Well,
people work, like I work 3 jobs,
But
just to, you know, be able to
right,
work.
but I mean to
So
do
again, it's
something
the
to this
government.
type of.
Well, they should do more.
And I know what you're saying about the RTC here, okay, because, I
And you could talk to
totally,
the council, you could talk to the Board of Ed, they don't answer you.
nope, same thing.
They don't
I've been
answer
in
you.
front of the Board of Ed.
They're
and
told-
They're not
just-
allowed to
They're
respond
not
to
to
you.
respond, so
They're
why go to
not-
a meeting?
So
They don't listen.
they cannot respond
Well-
to you because,
All I'm suggesting is that if you wanna see change, you gotta stay involved. You can get as disgusted
Well,
as
you
you
know I'm involved.
You can get as disgusted as you want, but you cannot walk away. You gotta stay there and you gotta make sure you fight for what you believe in. Trust me, we're frustrated. Look, things have changed so dramatically for me. When I was first elected in 2011, I mean, I had a tough time dealing with my own leadership and everything else. Now I am the leadership. I'm a senior deputy of the Senate Republicans. Basically, the leader and I are like this. We have conversations about everything. We agree on what the direction of our caucus and our party is. But it took 15 years to get there. But you can do it, is all I'm suggesting. And I believe that our days as members of the minority are numbered. I really do. I think we're the future majority. We really are. I bring that up it kind of in jest because I said that on the floor of the Senate. You know, it's funny because I do a lot of speaking on the floor of the Senate, and usually they let me get away with saying whatever I'm going to say. But sometimes I get very aggressive, and I'll have one of the Democrat leaders stand up and object, and say, you know, Senator Sampson needs to stay on topic or whatever. And I was going off on this one thing where they were blowing through the budget guardrails, and I went off on kind of a tangent for a while talking about, you know, responsibility and things like that. And they let me get away with a murder, really, in my view. I was just kept on going more wild about what
you
they were
push the
doing.
envelope.
I pushed the envelope because I was trying to get to the political point. This is what they want you to stay on the substance of the bill. And it's very hard when you're trying to make an argument about the ideology that is being debated. So I try and get to that all the time. They let me kind of get away with whatever I was getting away with. The one thing that I said that made Senator Looney get up and object is I said, I'm going to stop referring to ourselves as the minority. We are the future majority in the state. And that's when he got up and he was like, oh, you can't say that. You know? I just thought it was so comical that that's the thing they put. But of course, in his closing remarks, he mentioned how they picked up a Senate seat. So I guess what's good for them is not good for the.
Well, without election validity,
Thank you.
we have nothing.
Yes.
And we do not have that.
No.
So we won't be the future majority unless our elections are cleaned up.
We agree.
Thanks, Linda.
So
Thank you very
listen, just please tell me when you get people together, and I have people that are gonna come in and do a PowerPoint presentation. We're drilling down on districts right now.
Okay.
And then again, this is all going federal.
Would you
so.
consider doing it as a public
What?
forum?
I think it would be good for the people, you need to see the information first, and then yes,
Okay.
we can do a public forum, and we are rolling it out to certain media outlets. We actually presented some of the data at the Cadillac Ranch a couple of days ago. But, you know, again, you are the lawmakers, okay? And there are several federal things that are gonna be happening.
Well, we put in probably close to 100
Yeah.
bills between us on election
But
integrity.
again, now this has to come from the people.
Right.
You know, at all of our legislatures, they don't have the power. We have the power. So
Right.
when they pass something in Hartford, and to me, illegal representation equals illegal legislation. So they have to prove that they actually were elected, okay? But, and again, there's no audit record, so you can't. And that violates federal law. And, you know, hopefully now we have a Department of Justice that will investigate this, and we can't release names because it has to be investigated.
Well, I definitely hope that happens. I hope that
Yes.
the Trump DOJ does get involved. We've written to them on several things, DEI.
Yeah.
Of course, you know, the Democrats in Connecticut continue to double down on these policies.
Yeah.
Right.
What else is it?
You didn't talk about the Trust Act or the gun bill.
Oh yeah, we should talk about all those
I
things
mean,
tonight
we've
too.
got 5 minutes.
But I wrote to what the heck's her name?
And
Pam Bondi, yeah.
Yeah, Nolan, what did we write to her about? We wrote to her about DEI, we wrote about election integrity, and something else. Must have been immigration, yeah.
So the election, actually, Connecticut's the 21st state, and we are tied to the federal lawsuits. There's 8 that are sitting right now, and the DOJ has just filed 2 HAVA violations in 2 states.
Yeah.
Connecticut's HAVA violations are very clear cut, and we have all evidence, including court cases and the FOIA state hearing that I did. So, you know, good luck. Hopefully they will take it up. If they don't, then I don't know what to say, but we have done all that we can,
Right.
and we'll continue to push, and
Yeah.
we'll see what
At
actually
some
happens.
point, there will be a critical mass of people in the state who've had enough and want to hold their government accountable.
Right.
And that's why we hold these forums, that's why we do all the things that we do, is we're trying to get to as many people as we can, to get as many people angry. I don't like making people angry, but I want them to be aware so they can take action and take our state back.
So 2 weeks, the HAVA violations will be filed, and along with all the other paperwork, and everybody's gonna be getting certified letters. And then, like I said, I don't want you to be, you're gonna, in those packets, you're going to see what the 2024 fraud is, but I have not given you the drill down on the data of where we found it. And
Right.
again,
Well, then
that's
we'll meet
because
with
I
you
haven't
and-
gotten the okay
Okay.
yet.
Well, when you do, let me know, and then we can meet and.
Well, no, we can meet at any time.
Okay.
Nope, we can meet at any time, because I can show you those things, it's just
You
that,
can't release them, gotcha.
right, we can't release the 2024, but,
Do you have another
Thank
packet?
you.
excuse me?
Do you have
You
another
wanna
packet?
move quickly? We have
I
like 3
don't.
minutes. You
I
wanna
don't,
talk
because
about
again,
that? No, no.
there will be,
I wanna
there will
talk
be a
about what
release,
these
and it'll be on
folks,
social
wanna talk
media.
about.
And your name again?
Come on, any more
Linda.
questions?
Linda what?
Delesio.
Thomas Custer. Nice to meet you.
There we go.
I worked for the electric utility for 32 years.
Yeah.
I believe I have the solution.
It's your fault.
Yes, it is.
Yeah.
I believe I have the solution, adding 100 to 200,000 megawatts to the USA grid.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, again, solutions are easy.
No, they're not.
No, yes, they are. They're completely easy. The
We'll
problem
try to
is
implement them.
well, that's right. There's no will for people to actually implement any of this stuff. They like it the way it is. Otherwise, they would be changing it. I mean, you think that the majority party doesn't understand people upset about their electric bills? They think there's not enough people
I
upset.
can go into that side of it, that you make the utility a collection agency for the state and cities. A third of your poles and wires are 2/3 of a home bill.
Yeah.
And 30% of that is state mandated.
Yeah.
Between all the tax, sales tax, gross earnings tax, but
Yeah.
I don't even wanna get into that side. But how to integrate the battery technology with the grid, that we can bring the efficiency up. They wanna double for AI.
Right.
So how do you build more power plants?
Yeah.
The VP of Eversource for transmission says it takes decades to put in transmission, to site it. And if you don't have to, by shifting the load, we can increase the grid capacity by 30% without building a new generation system.
Yep.
But they're not integrating everything. I worked in a power plant, so I tested them, worked with major customers. And I spent the past year just looking at how to integrate it.
Yeah.
So I'd like to be able to talk to you how that could work.
We'd be delighted to have the conversation.
And I gave my name.
Yeah.
So-
But you have to recognize that we can propose whatever we want unless there is
It
the
needs-
will.
It needs to go national. It's not just Connecticut, it has to go with the
Right.
grid, ISO, independent system operators, so it has to be integrated.
Exactly, yep. All right, well, we can certainly talk.
I have a question.
The state of Connecticut receives federal funds for certain programs. What, are those funds written into the budget as revenue?
Yes, yes and no.
And
Yes
then
and
what,
no.
and then what happens if the government withholds those funds because we're a sanctuary state?
Well, there's a couple parts to that question. It's a good question though. I mean, the way we count the money in the state budget has changed over time.
Yeah.
When I was first elected, they used to actually include in the total, budget number, the federal funds too. Some of that is, considered pass-through money like Medicaid. Most Medicaid programs, the state pays 50%, the feds pay 50%. Sometimes it's 25%. Some things are 90-10. It's interesting. But that is written into the budget in the sense that they're factoring in the federal funds, but they don't often count the federal money, because when you do that, that means our budget looks higher and they want our budget to look small. It also means that when you have things like a spending cap, et cetera, you are trying to cheat to stay below it, so you hide the money and you consider it an off-budget expense. But the larger question was about what happens if the federal government withholds money.
Right.
And of course, President Trump has said he's gonna not fund states that do DEI, he's not gonna fund states that do sanctuary policies for illegal immigration. And the Democrats in the state are daring him, effectively.
Yes.
And I will tell you that the reason why they are is because they care more about making a political issue to make the president look bad than they do about the actual consequences to their own constituents.
Yes.
So they're daring the president to cut off funding for the
Yep.
state so they can say, look, you didn't get your funding because of him. When in fact it's because of them. Because they refuse to back down on their insanity. And it is insane.
If we had a media that was legit, they would report that and say, no, here's what's really happening,
Right.
people. Not just whatever the Democrats say, this is what's really happening. But
That's
we
another-
don't, we don't get the truth,
You're true, that's a big disadvantage for us, even here in Connecticut, we don't have the media.
especially in Connecticut.
We don't have the media on our side at all.
Yeah, and no sign of it getting better. I mean, the most of the left-leaning publications are buying up other publications, not the other way around.
Well, that's how they do it in the communist country.
Yeah.
So you substitute the word left for a communist socialist state, and that's exactly what we have in the media. Just like the Iranians, they don't have no idea what really is going on in the world. And the people who vote for Democrats really don't understand the true story, what's behind the story. That's what they do.
Maybe.
The last
I mean, I got
newspaper
people
we
on
had
board
was
Democrats,
Republican
and
American.
it's just amazing how narrow
Yeah,
their thought process is.
Yeah.
It's just, and they don't do any research. They don't even I don't know, Channel 8 said this. Okay.
the
A
last,
lot of people, I'm sorry.
the last fair newspaper I thought balanced in here was Republican American, and they sold it to Hearst Media. And now it's gone to the left.
A lot of people,
Run to a communist state.
sadly, I think most people, because politics is complicated, I mean, it really is, to actually understand everything that's going on with each one of these issues. I mean, every issue you can dig in as deep as you want to go. I mean, it's very hard to learn, the learning curve to get caught up to speed about federal politics and then state politics, which people know even less about. It's super hard. So people don't do their own research. They rely on trusted sources. And if you like Chris Murphy and you trust Chris Murphy and he tells you whatever, you're gonna believe him. And sadly, we deal with that a lot, where people just are parroting whatever their trusted source says. We have it on our side too. There's people that trust every word that comes out of President Trump's mouth. Whatever. We need to get back to having a society where everyone recognizes it's us against the government, and not, we're gonna necessarily trust any figures in the government, including us. We want people to hold us accountable. That's the way our system's supposed to work, yes.
The Constitution was to protect us from the government,
That's correct.
right? And people have lost sight about it.
And we remind our colleagues all the time that our number one obligation
That's the
is
Second
not
Amendment.
just to make policy or make the world a better place. It is to defend and protect the rights of our constituents. That's the first job. That's what the main part of our oath is about. That's the first thing we should be doing. Because the rights of the people are being violated over and over again. Not just with the confiscation of your wealth via taxation and fees, etc., and hidden taxes and fees on your homeowner's insurance bill, your electric bill, your cable bill. I mean, it's just crazy the way they're confiscating people's money, but denying the rights of representation, on what's in your kid's school, or your representation about the way your town's gonna be set up for zoning, all of those things. Gun rights, it just goes on and on. We're losing every day, bit by bit. It's hard to point out and say, oh, these are big, huge chunks of freedom we're losing, but they are incrementally taking away freedom all the time. And on that note, we're gonna wrap it up.
Thanks, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.